It's Halloween, and we have a great crew of horrible fanatics to torment and terrorize your eyes on Twitch and your ears on podcast. Welcome, Judge Steven, special guest host, Judge Brinkman, Judge Wolfman, and Judge Thorin Thompson. With a guest lineup like that, there's not much more to say except happy Halloween, trick or treat, and let's get rolling with this month's Spellburn. So, first things first, we've got a new email. I'm just going to mention it here once again at spellburnband@gmail.com. So go ahead, drop us some letters, some electronic e-letters, and do that kind of thing. And then also fun news, we're going to be on Twitch going forward, regular time, last Monday of the month, 9 o'clock Eastern time. That's last Monday of the month, 9 o'clock Eastern time. Check us out on Twitch, on Goodman Games official Twitch. And, the podcast will drop a few days after that, something like that. We got an introduction to a guy who needs no introduction. Judge Stephen Newton is one of the earliest pioneers of DCC third-party stuff with Attack of the Frogs, Haunting of Larvick Island, and literally too many freaking adventures to mention. And then has also produced a ton of stuff for Goodman Games, including some seminal horror work like They Drank Randall in Red, Creep, which is not the easiest thing to say, and The Corpse That Love Built, and many more of those. So welcome very much, Stephen.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you for having me on the show. And Judge Jen, so good to see you again.
Great to see you too, Stephen.
Yes, we had a late scratch for Judge Jen, a very late scratch for Judge Jen. So we are bringing in a different Judge Brinkman, who's very graciously agreed to step in. So thank you, Judge Bob.
It's just a mask. They do great things with latex and silicone these days.
Oh, so tell me, Judge Jen, who's really the better half? I've asked this before, but I've never really got a straight answer on this. Oh, okay. Well, that's very good. That's very good. I would have written a nice intro like Steven got, but I didn't have time. So Judge Bob actually probably needs no introduction because he does everything. And you know him from Sanctum Secorum and many other things, Skulls and Crossbones and all that good stuff. Including DCC horror adventures like Night of the Bog Beast. So this is going to be a horror triumvirate. And thanks for being here, Judge Gen 2. V2. We're going to call you Judge Gen V2.
Okay.
We're going to head over to the tavern and talk about gossip, what's going on with DCC, MCC, and so on. Judge Bob, go ahead and tell me what's up in your end of the world.
Well, I've wrapped up everything for Caverns of Thracia, which was announced. I'm like elbows deep in two projects that haven't been announced for Goodman Games. And recently I've finally gone full steam ahead on my guide to Lovecraftian short films. So I've cataloged about 1,500 Lovecraftian short films, probably going to put about 1,000 in the book. And so that's been keeping me busy. So a horror show is great because I am living and breathing horror right now.
Well, that's awesome. Do you know when that's going to come out? And
I'm hoping to have it out in time for next year's Lovecraft Film Festival in October.
Does it have a working title?
Not yet. I'm more worried about contents right now than the exterior.
Cool. Well, great to hear. You got to let us know when that comes out so we can give it a shout when we get there. Judge Stephen, maybe one of the best costumes ever on the Spellburn Twitch.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the spirit of Halloween. I appreciate that. what is going on in your neck of the woods out in the West Coast?
Out on the West Coast. So out on the West Coast, I recently ran a couple of games at Big Bad Con in San Francisco, which was a lovely little convention. Good time out there. I've been prepping the 10th anniversary printing of Attack of the Frogs, which is so late that it will come out on the 12th anniversary. But
Nice.
we had COVID and all that. It's going to have a bonus epilogue adventure by Judge Joan Destroyer. So I've been
Nice.
editing and playtesting that. So long story about that one for another time. And I recently finished up turning in By Mitra's Bones Meet Thy Doom, which is a Dark Tower adventure, which is going to be shipped with the OAR version of Dark Tower. So that was a really fun project to be able to spend some time in Mitra's Fist and all that.
Oh, nice. Nice. Very good. Yes, very good. And a good segue. That is going to bring me to mention we do have some GoFundMes I want to give a shout out. I'm a little bit late, actually. However, better late than never. We do have three of our friends in the community who could use some help. And actually, they've got a lot of help already, which I'm happy to say. Reed Sanfilippo from America's Survival Guide has a GoFundMe. I'll put all of these in our show notes, of course. Jess McDevitt, member of our Goodman Games family, of course. You know, jack of all trades, customer service. Many of you have interacted with her if you bought stuff and emailed with questions and all kinds of stuff. Obviously a great person in terms of helping people out. And also Janelle Jacques has had some issues and is also got a GoFundMe going. And where would you even start in talking about her contributions to gaming since the 70s? I mean, just literally a legend. And of course, we're deep into, you know, Dark Tower and other stuff. So it's great. Go ahead and give those guys some love. And also, special congratulations in the do-gooder column to Corey Welch, Edwin Nagy, and others, of a cast of a dozen good guys who ran a Teagle Manor crazy event at Gamehole Con. It raised $5,000 for the American Cancer Society. So good job, guys. I will just mention really quick, my gossip. I got Crawl Magazine number 13, Deathmatch, which has a PvP modeled on like Quake and other video games, after we talked about it with Dak a couple months ago. It's terrific. Thank you, Reverend Dak, for the hard copy. With my cool Errol Otis background, I don't think I can really, I don't know if I can't really show it. I also got Prison of the Forsaken Bear God sent to me from Space Penguin Inc. And that was, it's really fun. It's a standalone third-party adventure from Space Penguin, which is Judge Jarrett's new publishing venture, and it was actually really neat. I loved it. It has a little hex crawl thing, and it gets, I think, a little more dungeony at the end. The one thing that I noticed about both Prison of the Forsaken Bear God and the Crawl 13, the Deathmatch issue, is they both are done in kind of a little bit of a more of a OSE, old school essentials kind of bullet point style of describing the encounters and going block by block. So I thought that was interesting that that's kind of percolated into some of our third party stuff. I don't know if people like that or don't like that. In my, you know, by my thing, it made me kind of be like, oh, this would be really super easy to just pick it up and drop it in and play it. So I kind of like it. But that's by Stella Condry, of course, and she was on her show three months back or something like that. Anyway, a lot of fun. And I played a great game of Die Robot Die, which is like a play test for a crazy robot funnel thing that they're doing as part of the crazy third-party Purple Planet thing. So that, in case you're not aware, they're doing a huge call for third-party products for this Purple Planet venture. I probably shouldn't say too much because I don't even know that much about it. Bob or somebody probably knows way more than me, but it sounds cool as hell. They're going to have a bunch of third-party content for Purple Planet. I assume they're going to republish some stuff, and that should be pretty neat.
The Purple Planet reprint, by the way, according to Harley, is going to have the complete glossography. I mean, ever since it came out, we've all been hunting down the individual pages, trying to collectively, crowdsource the whole thing and never succeeded. Now the whole thing is going to be in the new volume.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Excellent. All right, guys, why don't we bring in our guest, and then the four of us will go deep with that eminence before we descend down into the crypt. For you know who. So why don't we step away? We'll bring in our first guest, and we'll be right back.
Tell me now, what could it be that calls us so incessantly?
All right. So with us, we've got Judge Thorin, we've got Judge Bajen, and we've got Judge Stephen. I've got here 3 people who have done the DCC horror. So this is kind of the dream team right here to talk about the horror genre. And I'm going to kick it off, and I'm going to throw one to Stephen to start. Actually, I'm going to ask you guys all to talk about this. I'm going to go Stephen, Bob, Thorin. How does horror work in DCC? It's obviously, we deem it successful enough that it has its own line of, because we've got DCC horror. Okay, so, and I think They Serve Brandolin Red was the first one. I mean, Stephen, did we think that was before there was a horror line at all? I think originally, right?
That is correct. I had started working with Joseph. I wanted to write for Goodman Games. And while I would never do this today, at the time he asked me to come up with an Appendix N author that I wanted to emulate. And I went back and I'm like, well, I didn't do that, but I wrote this ghost story adventure. And he's like, oh, the timing's good, because I was thinking about doing a Halloween adventure. So that's how that came about. And so that was like, they were called the Halloween line, I think the first 3 years, and then they became the horror line. So yeah. So the question is, if I had to simplify it, I would say a lot of RPGs, like the traditional old school RPGs, it would be considered heroic adventure. There's like big foe, but it's a lot of sword and sorcery. And for me, a horror adventure invokes more of a sense of dread, maybe some moral ambiguity, fear, isolation. So I would try to bring those elements into the adventure. And then, of course, there's always just the common tropes, and I'm sure we'll all talk about who we've stolen from when we wrote our adventures. But if you have something that feels really familiar as it relates to an iconic horror monster, that's an easy way to get that horror feel.
Bob, what do you think? What's the difference between a regular DCC game, which can, an adventure, let's say, which they can be pretty horrific in their own right. I think of, even Sailors with a crazy lake monster and, plenty of horror touches. But, the DCC horror line itself, if we're talking about horror-specific adventures.
Well, I think a large portion of the difference really is the thin line of the differences in the telling. Right, because you're right. Sailors on the Starless Sea, with just a little bit of a nudge from the judge here or there, or stressing certain descriptors, is a horror adventure. It's all about building that atmosphere and that dread. And the nice thing with the horror line is we've already concentrated on that part. We've brought that forward, right? But it exists in most of the DCC adventures to begin with. I mean, People of the Pit, that's creepy as it is. Daniel J. Bishop wrote Silent Nightfall.
Oh, that one, okay.
And that one, I mean, that's a flat out horror adventure, at least in my opinion. That those owl people just gave me the creeps. It really is. It's how you talk about things, how you describe things, and carry that vibe forward to the players.
So that's an interesting point. So because this is not in our notes or anything, but you could actually probably make almost any adventure a horror adventure if you really set it up right, try to keep that tone. You probably have to have the players buy in, depending a little bit as well.
Yeah, but it's like you can go on YouTube and people remix movie trailers all the time. They put the dark, creepy music in, and all of a sudden, it's a functioning trailer for a horror film that you'd be interested in seeing. It's just about the atmosphere, and the horror line makes sure that we bring it forward and provide it in a nice, easy to project chunks.
Yeah. Thorin, tell me I want to talk about It Consumes, but I also want to talk about Sky of the Crimson Flame, I think your first adventure, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a horror adventure too, I would say. You've got it's pretty horror-y.
I mean, yeah, there's children head bats flying around and a lady without her skin. I'd say it's along the lines of horror.
I mean, is there any difference for you? Did you think of when you did It Consumes, did you say, okay, I'm going to tell you what I think is different about it in a minute, but what did you say? I've got to do something more horror for when I do It Consumes.
I mean, I actually went the opposite direction, since It Consumes is based off very much so the campy film of The Stuff. So where
Larry Cohen for the win.
Whereas the horror is in Sky of Crimson Flame is Hellraiser-esque, Evil Dead sort of gory stuff. It Consumes, it's horrible in a lighthearted sort of way. Even like the spoilers, even one of the bad guys isn't even like, he's not trying to like rule the world or anything. He just wants money, like his whole scheme is greed, which is a part of the movie The Stuff as well. But The Stuff wants to rule the world. So there is some body horror and stuff that is included in that, obviously. That's kind of where I go towards for whatever reason, is weird body horror stuff. But yeah, so they're opposite ends of that horror spectrum, those two adventures, for sure.
Got it. What I was going to ask, I'm going to have to give some spoilers. So
it's been out for a while. You should have read it already, people.
Exactly. So I'm going to suggest to you guys, all of you, at the same time, and Stephen, I think, touched on it a little bit with isolation, and I forget if you said helplessness, but I think one of the big things about, especially as I think of It Consumes, and also one of my favorite Stephen adventures, Creep, Scrag, Creep, except for saying it. I love everything about that adventure except saying it. But so one thing I'd say is fairness, right? There are things in both of those adventures that are not entirely fair in the sense because RPGs are games, and again, spoilers, you've been warned. It Consumes, there is an element of contract cards where you're passing out little notes to the players and saying, okay, here's what you've got to go and do this thing in this mine or whatever. And one player is the traitor. He's the bad guy. It's betrayal at Hill House or whatever, right? And his secret card is like, you're the bad guy. You got to make the other players do the bad stuff and consume the stuff, right? Which is obviously not entirely fair to that player, although you have to pick the right guy. Every group has a person for that, right?
I mean, that's technically an optional thing that you can do, but yeah.
But it's pretty great. I mean, everybody's going to give it to like me or Trevor or somebody in my gaming group. But anyway, or and in Creep, Scrag, Creep, and this might be true of Sky of the Crimson Flame, though I've never run it, but looking at your sort of notes in the intro, Thorin, they're basically really frickin' hard adventures. I mean, Creep, Scrag, Creep for a funnel is freaking really deadly.
Yes.
And I think
Agreed.
it's deadly. I mean, it's deadlier than other funnels, Stephen. Isn't it safe to say you're trapped on a ship with multiple giant, lizard guys, and they're going to eat your face, all 16 or 20 of your faces at some point.
Yeah, are we rich with spoilers now?
I mean, spoiler. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's Alien on a boat.
Yeah.
And when I wrote it, I actually got permission. I'm like, look, my intent here is to, instead of having the big boss fight at the end, is to have a boss that can't be killed, essentially. And I put in all these mechanics so you can't really trap the monster, or you can't do this. I mean, that monster is going to stalk you through the entire adventure. So the gimmick, if you will, is at some point the players have to figure out they're going to die on here unless they figure out a way to escape. So that was the twist on that one. But yeah, you're right. If you go into it with traditional thinking of I'm going to fight this big bad guy at the end, you'll get a TPK.
And you're not really, I mean, it's been a while since I ran that like 2 or 3 times in the COVID virtual era, but it's not, you're not spoon fed the way to kill the thing, if I recall. It's there, but it's not, you know how it is. Hints can be really hard and really, or easy, or in the middle. And I'd say it's not super hard, but it's not like, oh, there's a note that there's a silver bullet over there, and
Right.
that kind of thing.
There's a couple of letters in there, but yeah, the biggest tell, if you will, is that you keep getting attacked by the thing, and by the second, it's growing in size and power each time. So it shouldn't take you too long to figure out, man, if I face this guy a 4th time, it's going to be Godzilla.
Right.
We do need a Godzilla adventure.
Right.
By the way.
Not to be confused with our next guest, Wolf Manzella, which anyway, we'll get there in a minute. I just want to mention special shout out to Web of All Torment, which is also unfair in the sense that bad things happen in an inn and the players just start out in the inn. Like there's no agency, there's no nothing, like, oh, you're in an inn and now bad things are happening to you, basically, which it's a horror. So, at some point you're like, well, I've either signed my players up to play a horror game or they've signed up to play a horror game or whatever. And, I'm just doing this to you. Like, you wouldn't necessarily want to drop it in a campaign, but if, you sign up for Greg Creep or Web of All Torment in a con, you know what you're getting into more or less, right? And I think the horror genre gives you that. I mean, if you go to see a horror movie, you're going to see horrible things done to people. If you, play a DCC horror game, you may not have quite as much agency as you normally have. Is that a fair statement?
Do you want to take this one, Bob? I've got an opinion, but
I think you have just as much agency as you do normally, right? I mean, you show up to a table, you've agreed to play the adventure that's being run. And so I don't think there's a loss of agency so much as your expectations shift drastically from I'm going to run around and kill things to, oh my God, I need to survive. I think one of the adventures that best hit me with that feeling was the Sinister Sutures of the Sempstress. And, if you think, Creep is hard, that's a tough one. And I mean, that's like a 5th or 6th level adventure. We were playing it with our campaign characters, and I was afraid for my character's life. As it should be, right, for a horror adventure.
That's where the real horror comes in, is characters you actually care about going through one of these adventures.
Yeah, it's not like you're playing Tomb of Horrors with pre-gens and a shredder. These are the characters you've built to that level.
Yeah.
But it really is that kind of that atmosphere changes your thinking. Just like Stephen was saying, it's not a matter of we're going to kill this monster. It's how are we going to survive this monster?
I totally get you, Stephen. What was what's your smart Alec remark going to be exactly here? I want to hear.
Well, it was actually very similar to Bob's. It's I don't think horror adventures take away the player agency, although a lot of my horror adventures start with like, read some intro text, roll for initiative, and you're already deep into the action. But there should not be an expectation of survivability in a horror adventure. If you've signed up for horror, then I think there's a better chance of, and obviously funnels are one thing because you never expect survivability in a funnel. But like even the first level, second level adventures that are horror adventures, you should probably think that there's a better chance than most that your character will come out or not come out the way they went in.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up, but before we do, Thorin, I want to get your other thoughts, and I want to know what else is coming up for Owl Night, or what you're doing with Goodman, etc.
So with Owl Night, the production for the second printings of Sky of Crimson Flame and Blights of Eastern Forest have begun, and so I'll start shipping that hopefully by early December. And I've been working on the title I teased stupidly during the first printing, which is Seekers of the Other Worlds, which is going to be a semi-sequel to Sky of Crimson Flame, where you finally take care of that necromancer that split his soul and whatnot in Sky. And it's a multiverse hopping adventure that might rival DCC 100 by the time I'm done writing it. So why I
8 spinners?
What?
8 spinners?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's like 5 adventures in one, basically. But you may not go to all 5 of these other worlds because something might happen and skip you to Act 3 or whatever. So I've been torturing myself for years trying to get this out and written, and so that's the big project. And then I got a couple other things I want to pitch to Goodman, and we'll see if they get picked up. But the benefits of having your own publishing company is you can just do it yourself. So
do your stuff. Yeah, I love it. Well, I love it. Well, Judge Thorne, thank you for stopping by the Spellburn. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And it's great to hear from you. And I want to say, a wise wolf once told me, puking is great in horror stuff. And as I was looking back over the stuff, I saw much puking, including the cover of the stuff, has the statue puking up the stuff, was so, perfect. And puking is horror is puking. So I just want to leave everybody with some, you thought Mike and Brendan were giving you all this good stuff on Keep on Crawling, but you heard it on Spellburn. Puking is horror is puking. I mean, The Exorcist, need I say more? All right. We're going to descend down into the crypt, so we'll need to step away just for a moment, and we'll be right back.
Why have you let these creatures into my crypt? We have some kind of brinkman and some kind of dog, Steven. This is a charming costume, actually. I'm a sucker for cute puppies and things like that. Don't tell anyone. Welcome to the crypt of email. We're actually getting into 2023, but first we're going to go back with a genuinely undashed-dead email from Judge Stephen Murish. That's not you, Judge Stephen, that's somebody else. I miss Google Plus. In Google Workspace, formerly Google Apps, there's a feature called Currents, which is Google Plus, but limited to the organization. I'm seriously considering forming a nonprofit for the support of RPGs called the Recreational Arts Collective. And as a nonprofit, I would have access to a basic version of Google Workspace for free with a 100-user limit. This means we could have an environment very much like old DCC RPG G+ group, but with the restriction of being limited to 100 users. They would have access to all kinds of stuff from Google Workspace, meetings without time limits, Jamboards, Google Docs, etc. There would be space available for storing images and docs, and certainly people can link to outside resources. What do peeps think? You think something like this would be worthwhile? Could we recapture the magic? Would the user limit prove too exclusionary? Well, Thank you, Stephen, for your email from way back in the days of 2021. A true undead email about a true creature from the grave, namely G+.
Too soon.
Yes, too soon, sorry. Stephen, Judge Stephen, you think you know so much with your puppy costume. What do you have to say about this?
Well, thank you, Crypt Paper, and you're looking lovely as ever. This email, I think, is so weathered that I believe 2 of the products, including Google Currents, has since been end of lifed, much like yourself. So Google Currents is no more. Jamboards, I believe, was officially retired a couple months ago. But the intent is good. And if memory serves, I think other Judge Stephen, actually did create a wiki a couple years ago. So he may have actually started this up. But like anything, you want to go where the material is. So I say Godspeed, use whatever products are still out there and grab the people and bring them over there. I think the community is thirsty for that sort of fellowship.
Well said, Judge Bob. Do you have anything you want to add?
You know, I think we're all still pained and grieving the loss of G+, and nothing has really quite filled the void. I mean, the Facebook group is really solid. It's got great folks. You know, when G+ went under, people had hopes for MeWe, and that just never really materialized. And Elo and all these other things. It's just a question of finding the right space again, and we'll always have G+.
Very well put, very well put. Your heartbreak is my food, mortals. All right, look, we have a not so undead email. This one is only 8 months old, from the greatest Spellburn emailer of all, DM Kojo. Now look, I know how it is with the living. You like to talk and talk and talk and talk. We're going to look at his suggestions, and we're going to give a lightning round, thumbs up, thumbs down, maybe 10 words or less opinion on each of them. Are you ready?
Ready.
Very good. Greetings, exalted burners of spells. DCC RPG has so many fantastic mechanics that enhance the feel of the game, but one of my favorites is the dice chain. You should see the way my players' eyes light up when I tell them to roll a d24 to hit instead of their usual d20. You should mention their heartbreak when it's a d14. Over the years, I've tried to implement the dice chain more frequently as a judge. I have adopted a rule of cool philosophy regarding the dice chain. Here are some examples of interesting things that have led to movement along the dice chain at my tables. Okay, gentlemen, here is your moment. Number 1, a PCR monster who endures a critical hit may be moved down the dice chain on their next attack, depending on the result on the critical hit table rule. Stephen?
Yes? No? Am I?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thumbs up, thumbs
Do it.
down. You do it. Judge Bob?
I like it. Make crits even deadlier.
I say no, monster. Well, okay, yeah. Yeah, if it applies equally to PCs, yes. As long as it applies to both. As long as it's fair to the monster, yes. Very good. Crits should be deadlier, deadlier, deadlier. Okay,
Although I would say, with a spoiler alert, our next guest has a permanent injury table, which I would prefer to moving up and down the dice chain. So
that kind of equivocating is only done by the living. Number 2, a cleric will move down the dice chain if they're trying to do something that may not be favored by their deity, in addition to possible disapproval, or they could move up the dice chain if they're doing something that their deity particularly likes. Like turning up. I don't even want to talk about that. It's okay, never mind that word. Anyway, what do you think? Stephen?
I'm going to give that one a no. That one's a little too squishy for me. I like the disapproval rules.
I like it because it balances out the fact that, you know, wizards have spellburn and clerics can only spellburn in like very certain situations, but I think just turning is not enough. It needs to be, if you're going to go up the dice chain, it's got to be spectacular.
I'd say don't. Well, yes, I'd say anything that disadvantages a cleric is good. I hate clerics. Hate them so much. Hate them. Number 3, any PC can move up the dice chain if they can link their 0-level occupation to the task at hand. Hunters trying to track an animal in the forest. Beggar trying to convince the town. Email zombie trying to eat the brains of a small village child. That's not on the list. A healer trying to find something useful. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, you get the idea. Steven.
This one I like. I'm going to give you this one. I like this a little bit more than trained versus untrained action die. So thumbs up.
Bob.
See, I'm going to go thumbs down for exactly the opposite reason. I prefer trained versus untrained, D10 versus D20, as opposed to just one small bump. Right? I mean, that is quite a few steps up the dice chain for trained if you can tie it into your occupation. I mean, that's how the skills work.
I say yes, but only because the actual rule is always forgotten, and people let people do all sorts of things on a D20 that they shouldn't be able to do when they should be rolling a D10. And if people implemented it right, it would be better. But since they never do, then allowing people to go up the dice chain is probably more fair. I don't know. It's mostly because you're all drinking beer. How I miss beer when I was alive. Okay, number 4. Trying to do anything physical during adverse conditions could lead to moving down the chain. Climb a rope on it. This is obvious, right? Everybody agrees with this, right? Anytime you're climbing a rope on a windy. Is there anything to say? This is a yes, right?
This is a yes. This is great.
Absolutely. Dice chains are more interesting than +1 or +2 bonuses.
Yahoo! Totally agree. That's what makes DCC. Okay, a distracted opponent, number 5, could lead the attacker to move up. A distracted opponent, because they're distracted, could have the attacker might move up the dice chain to attack them on their attack round. So some disadvantage, essentially. It's disadvantage for DCC, right? Is what they're saying.
Oh man, I liked it until you said that.
Yes. I look forward to the day that 5e is like me, undead. Okay, well, enough said. But what do you think? Steven?
Same applies. I think playing with the dice chain is always more interesting than just negative or +1 or 2 bonuses. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up.
Bob?
I agree. You know, if you're being attacked by 4 people, you're going to be distracted while at least 2 of those people are attacking you. I think it's a great, easy mechanic to represent that.
Very, very good. Kojo, great emailer. I have feasted once more on your emails. Keep them coming, and remember to email the band at spellburnband@gmail.com. I can't have the dead email. I must say the living email, though it hurts me. I'm not sure how I feel about having the living in my crypt, so if anybody wants to tell us what you think of that, feel free. Alana, take these people back to the land of the living.
All right. Sorry, apologize. I didn't give the usual terror warning, to people who are about to descend into the crypt like I normally would. But, I guess Bob and Steven survived. Glad to see you guys made it out alive. As you can see, I'm far too important to risk my neck down in the crypt. But it's good to have you back. So thanks. And we've got a very special guest also joining us. And it is Wolf Manzella, who is the author of one of my favorite DCC products. I guess we'll call it a zine. It is entitled Macabre, Volume 1. I'm one of the people who doesn't pronounce the R in macabre. I'm just saying. Not everybody.
I believe
anyway.
that's the correct way to say it.
Well, it's the French way of saying it.
Macabre.
Macabre. But anyway, so Welcome, Wolf. Very good to have you. And you not everybody is seeing Steven's excellent kind of puppy costume, and Wolf has come without a costume, just as the Wolf Man that he is. So very, very nicely done on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell me about how you came up with the Macabre project.
Well, first, I want to say thank you for having me on. It's kind of been a DCC dream to appear on Spellburn, so bucket list for me. Check that off.
And I bet you never thought you'd have a real zombie on the show, and on top of that,
the Halloween show of all things. It couldn't be any better.
It's apropos.
But to answer your question, this little zine right here, I was inspired by two things. It was Crawl. I wanted to have a one-word sort of zine that had the powerful things of macabre, and Read with the America stuff was really inspiring to me. That was the two main inspirations for me, just being like, I can do this.
You mean the original Crawling Under Broken Moon stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know that stuff is very, very brilliant stuff. Absolutely.
It was so good. And I think for me, I love horror, obviously. I hope that's apparent. And I just sort of saw this little hole. There was a Transylvania Adventures that came out.
Right.
A long time ago. And that's sort of its own thing, right? That's kind of almost like the Ravenloft, gothic horror thing, which I very much hopefully try to explain in this zine is not really what I'm about, because it's been done and it's been done really well.
Yeah, so I want to hit two things here, and I want you all to weigh in on this, please. Sorry, the first point that I'm going to say, which is in that, I think it's Scott Mathis, isn't that right? Who did the
Yeah.
And it's a pretty interesting book. It was one of the very, very, very first things that came out when DCC did, and I mean, in the first year, I think it must have been in process before the actual rule book was published. But I think there's something in there in that book, as I recall, saying, this is not a true horror game. It's a DCC game that has horror elements in it, and I think sometimes there is a little bit of a tension between something that's actiony and D&D-ish and has turning and magical healing and stuff versus the horror thing. I mean, can a D&D-ish derived game like DCC be as horrible as a quote unquote finger quotes true horror game, Bob? You're a Call of Cthulhu guy, right?
I gave one of my Bog Beast playtesters nightmares, so I'm going to say yes. Again, it's the material. It's not the system. Yes, DCC and Wolf actually addresses it really well in Macabre when he's talking about, he doesn't like if you fail a roll and so now you're afraid, and really, Wolf, you addressed that great.
Thank you.
It's one of those things where it doesn't matter if the characters can be made afraid. If the players are creeped out, the characters will follow. And that's really the key with any system.
Yeah, I mean, when you know you have 4 zeros and you're fighting like a 8-foot giant fish lizard creature trapped on a boat, you're like, what are you going to use? Harsh language? Your guys don't have to make a will save to not be scared, right? Because you're freaking gonna die.
Well, and while Mr. Mathis was saying this isn't really a horror system, I ran there's one published adventure for it. I forget the title off the top of my head, but I ran it, and I ran it for Free RPG Day. I had more than a full table, so all the pre-gens came with male and female versions. I used them all, so I had double the party size, and it was my first ever TPK since I started running games in the 70s. So, we were talking about that whole expectation of survival going out the window. Transylvanian Adventures certainly hit that hard, although it did help that the party split in 3 directions. But it's a solid system. Also, I've talked to Scott. He released pretty much everything under Creative Commons. If anybody wants to release further adventures for it, they can. So that's something to consider. But I think for my money, and I was one of the people that was first on my block to have a copy, the cop's way to go.
Yeah, he'd be a great Spellburn guest someday, maybe. So, interesting thought. Let's talk. Stephen, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, I think that making the argument that D&D derived games can't be horror games is not going to get very far with you. But
Yeah, anything you can use, and I think what Wolf's zine does spectacularly is give you a bunch of tools to help you make your players afraid. So there's not one tool fits all. So, you can start with mood, you can start with atmosphere, you can start with different creatures, but at the end of the day, and if all else fails, you can puke. But it's a great toolbox of these are some of the tricks that you can help to put your players on edge.
I want to say there is a quote in here that talks about the optional tools for using, there's all these optional rules, and they're really pretty great. But I think the very last thing in that little section is, if all else fails, use puking. Puking is always awesome. It's like bonus tip: when in doubt, puke. An absurd amount of puke. Everyone hates puke. And I think Thorin took that to heart. He may have not have known it, but I mean, he knew that. He intuitively knew that, right?
Deep down, he knew.
Of course, he knew. He's a horror guy too. Wolf, terrific optional rules.
Thank you.
And my favorite one is bad things that happen to you when you die.
Right? Why not?
Tell us a little about that, please.
So that one came about with Evil Dead, any sort of movie like that, right? It's zombie movies, anything. You go down, and basically I tell the judge, anytime there's a dead body, that's just another resource for you to harness. I think having to deal with people that are in your party and deal with them as some sort of malevolent force, some sort of trickster, something that can just freak the party out, aggravate them, get under their skin a little bit. Why not do that? That's always fun, right?
Absolutely. A lot of this kind of struck me in a good way. I don't know if everybody would like it as I did, but I felt like there was a thematic callback to the old second edition AD&D second edition Ravenloft set, right? Because you sometimes refer to the setting as Necrovania, which you talk about in some of the setting part in the back of the second part of the book,
right?
But it's a little bit, Necrovania can be kind of different things, right? The judge can, it's more of a toolbox probably than a hex crawl that's really set out, piece by piece.
Sure.
But Necrovania has that sort of things where the land is evil and extra evil things are happening to the characters, because the very realm is evil, right? The realm of terror, as they used to say.
It all stems from the center. So my background, it's when I came up with the idea for the book, part of it was my love of trashy horror movies. I love trauma stuff.
Oh yeah.
Thorin did It Consumes, which the stuff Larry Cohen, love that's Basket Case, Frankenhooker. That's my jam. I love really weird. I call myself a sommelier of cinematic trash. And I think if you're going to steal stuff for horror, that's where to go. Go the weird, like stuff that nobody knows about. Go get like Blood Diner or something from like the Wizard of Gore. Just something really weird and off, like that your average person at a table is not going to know. You can basically steal it one for one because most people have never seen it. But the other big thing for me is video games. So big thing is Legend of Zelda, which has nothing to do with horror, but I think about Hyrule. And every time you play a new Legend of Zelda game, Hyrule is completely different. You have the Breath of the Wild stuff, which is kind of like post-apocalyptic. You have what's the cartoony one where he's like a pirate? That's like my favorite one. I can't think of the name of it. Wind Waker. It's like piratical adventures. So that was my thought, was like everyone that's going to play in Macabre, you're going to play in Necrovania, pick your style of horror, whether it be like weird Dario Argento, Italian splatter stuff,
Oh yeah.
dream atmosphere, 80s slashers, gothic horror, whatever you want it to be, make it, that's your version of Necrovania. That was my goal that I was trying to push across, and I hope it came across in the zine. Is that it's like, what's interesting to you? And I think you should have like one thing be the primeval. You can have a lot of different horror, but make sure that there's the castle itself is like, if you want to have like an Evil Dead setting, make sure that the evil coming out of Castle Necrovania in the center of this realm is one very particular type of horror, and focus on that for most of your sessions. And then feel free to sprinkle in some Killer Clowns from Outer Space when you get bored.
I think, yeah. And as we've been talking about the things that can go wrong and the stuff that can pop up in Necrovania, my thinking is keying in on assumptions. It's not exactly agency as much as things that usually work one way in role-playing games or in other media as appropriate, but in role-playing games, when things that usually you have a little more warning or you have a little more traditional thing, in a horror game, don't end up working that way, which is sometimes a surprise, and also sometimes you're filled with dread because it's not a surprise, but that it's, that this is going to be even a harder funnel, for instance.
Right. I think. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna talk about. We got a Death Stalker class in here. You've got some advice for tarot, and I love your lycanthropy rules because you've got it's kind of similar to what they did with demons and dragons in the bestiary part of the DCC book, where they've got all these different options, so you can sort of build, you could even just randomly generate, or you can just pick and choose, or a little of both.
Right.
But that's really a good toolkit, because I was actually screwing around with trying to make some lycanthropies the other day, and I know that seems to be, am I wrong, Bob, or is that like actually a gap in the thing? They don't have any lycanthropy stuff.
Well, you haven't read the Dark Tower stuff that's coming out, where we had to fill in a lot of those gaps. But I totally just dig the Wolfman werewolf distinction, because Wolfman's got nards.
It's got nards, yeah.
Nards.
Sure. This entire zine just takes me so back into so many wonderful movies and wonderful tropes.
That makes me. Thank you. That makes me so happy.
and I will say also, Macabre is the second zine we've featured on the second Spellburn in a row that has a recipe in it, a god,
right?
A actual true to God. You know what I'm trying to say? A verified literal recipe, which. I'm still not sure of that microwave cupcake thing that Judge Phil had for us, if that's really doable or not. He says it was, but I am sure that this is doable. The Moon Beast. You have a fancy drink for fancy people. I think this would come out in my Gothic horror game that we would all have. It's got gin, Cointreau, egg whites, and stuff like that. It's maybe kind of a different type of whiskey sour almost.
Yeah, a little. You got to freak people out with those egg whites.
Yeah, right. And then you just put an eyeball down in the martini glass when you're
Yep.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, very good. No, I quite like this scene. It's really, I read it a long time ago when it came out a couple years ago, and
I want to say it was like COVID. It was like 2020.
I just thought it was terrific, and I remembered how much I liked it, so I wanted to yank it out for this episode. And then I realized I hadn't looked at it in 2 years, so I went back and got familiar with it, and I enjoyed it as much as I did the first time. So, well done.
Thank you.
It is now, there is a volume 1 on the cover, so, yeah,
that was partially to kick myself in the rear to make more. Right, you can't really escape that if it's right dead center on the werewolf skull on the front. I have actually, I reached back out to Diogo. I commissioned him to do the artwork for the second volume. That is done. That's completed. I have it. Right now, I have so many ideas. I actually think that I'm going to just go in a full box set sort of thing. I have like an idea for so I'm thinking like each time you go to Necrovania, it's a different age of Necrovania. So I have a setting that I'm sort of cooking up, and it's just one of many possible settings that could happen. And I want to try to push that out as a box set is really the crazy thing that I'm pushing myself towards right now. So I've got like 5 or 6 new classes. I'm retweaking the Deathstalker. I'm going to re-put in a lot of stuff for the tarot, the rules, and how you can use that for inspiration. Stuff is happening. I just need to get pen to paper and kick myself in the butt and keep on pushing on. But there will be more.
And you've got, if I remember correctly, when the moon is not full, and you are in your human form, there's some kind of YouTube channel or something?
Yes, so that is another thing is me and my buddy Kamo, we've decided to we kicked off a YouTube channel called Basic Liches. And that's been going strong for just over a year. We are just about to crack like 4,000 subscribers. So if anyone's listening and you want to go check that out, we talk about everything. We've just recently done reviews for Dragonbane. We did like an unboxing and a review. I've played that. If you haven't played Dragonbane, I don't want to plug other things on this channel, but Dragonbane's pretty dope.
It's okay. Jen's not here. I mean, she's here, but she's not here. She's in the costume, so it's okay.
Damn it, Julian.
Yeah, exactly.
But we do reviews. We do like, my whole thing is it's like, I want more people playing role-playing games. I think they're great. Want to help out. Me and my buddy Kamo, we're figuring it out. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way. YouTube's its own beast. It's really difficult. Video editing is a nightmare. Takes up a lot of time. And that cuts into a lot of my writing time. But I tend to push I tend to have a lot of pokers in the fire. So I will get more macabre out there. I'll get more Necrovania. I will do more basic liches, and whatever anybody else wants from me. I'm just happy to be here.
That sounds like a blank check. I'm going to take you up on that. Okay, here's what I want from you. Here's what I want from the three of you. This is totally, speaking of unfair. I want the three of you, please. We're going to wrap it up. First, I want some good horror advice to leave our listeners with and viewers with. And then after that, this is going to be the harder one, and you're going to hem and haw about picking one. But I want you to tell me your favorite, most awful DCC monster from any adventure. Can be yours, can be somebody else's, whatever. Don't care. Anything. So, Judge Bob, I like this opportunity to pick on you, so I'm gonna Judge Jen, Bob Jen, I'm gonna pick on you first. Give our viewers /listeners some really good horror advice.
Know where your players' comfort levels are and walk right up to them. Hit them to those points where They know what's going on. They don't like what's going on. You're not going to scar someone. You're not going to leave them traumatized unless they're game for that. But hit those points. Body horror is always a great way to go. Thorin's done it. I've done it. I'm sure Steven and Wolf done it as well, right? When things are going wrong with your own body.
I will say on that, I noticed when I was looking over the Last Will and Testament of Obadiah Faulkner earlier, Stephen had which is a great adventure. We didn't even get to talk about it hardly at all. But Stephen had a very a good content warning, because that deals with real history and has things that might be dicey for people for all kinds of personal reasons, that not that it was handled insensitively, but just could be tricky for folks. And I thought that was, if you're dealing with that kind of level of reality, that's an excellent point. Stephen, give us some good horror advice.
So I'm gonna, it's one that I take to heart, but I also saw it in Wolf's zine, which is hit him in the sheets. So anything that permanently affects a character sheet. So when I was an AD&D guy, undead would steal levels, and that terrified me. So I have something like that in one of my adventures. But yeah, that puts real fear of loss into a person.
Yeah, no, that is a way to make your players scared for sure.
Yep.
Wolf, hit me with some horror advice that's not in macabre, if we can.
Sure. I think the most important thing really is player buy-in. It's very simple, but it's sort of the unwritten contract that when we're all sitting down at this table, you are going to buy into the fact that we're playing a horror game. We're playing DCC, but this one's horror. That player buy-in, just go for it. Just lean into it as a player. Help out your judge. That stuff, it just makes the session more pleasurable for everyone at the table. And the judge just lights up when you guys are buying into it. Get creeped out. Allow yourself to just be nerdy and sit around the table with your friends and just completely and wholly buy into the experience. You'll get way more out of it. I don't understand why more people don't do it. They always want to it's in a movie, you can see the zipper on the monster. It's don't look for that stuff. And my other thing is with monsters, with horror and combat, I think of sailors. I think of the Leviathan. That's it's like a puzzle. You can't really defeat that thing. Try to come up with bosses or big bads that are more combat puzzles where you have to use your brain rather than just your swords and spells. That stuff tends to
right.
It freaks people out.
If you can sort it, it's not really that horrible, right?
Exactly. Or if you sort it and it splits into another,
And speaking of limits and player buy-in, I heard a great piece of advice on Ken and Robin, that is Ken and Robin talk about stuff, or whatever that podcast is that they do with legendary stuff, Ken Haidt and Robin Laws. But they said, if you're trying to figure out where your player's tolerance for the gory stuff is, have them narrate some of their own blood and gore and let them do it. And some can fade out and some can get really ugly with it, but let them have a role in it. It'll be just as awful, maybe more, that they have to describe it. Okay. Monsters. Judge Bob, you're up. Best or most horrible DCC monster.
I'm going to go with two. I'm going to go with Daniel J. Bishop's owl things, whatever they were called in Silent Nightfall, because I will never forget them and they creep the hell out of me. And I'm also really partial to the swamp creatures in Night of the Bog Beast. When they slap you across the face and they leave that muck that then starts working its way into your mouth and into your sinuses, and you're suffocating, and when you remove it, it is tearing bits of flesh out with it. I really enjoyed that little bit of body horror. So
you're
my favorite that I've created, my favorite that I've played against.
You're trying to puke too the whole time, so.
And puking as well.
Very good, very good. Judge Stephen.
So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go with an older monster, but it does appear in DCC, and that would be, I've been afraid of rot grub since I was a small child. That original first edition monster manual image has creeped me out for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So they appeared
yeah.
in Sailors and beyond, but Rod, we're up.
Very solid. Wolf.
I am gonna go from Elzamon and the Blood Drinking Box. I'm gonna go with
Great
something that
adventure.
pukes. Those hairless cat things that follow you around, and if you roll that critical, oh, it's so good.
Mhm.
They vomit, I believe, right into your mouth hole. I love those things.
I'm just gonna pick one that I found in the last couple days, as I was doing research and the horrible, toilsome thing of reading awesome content for Spellburn. But the Corpse That Love Built has all sorts of fleshy golem contraptions and stuff like that. But and this is not a main part of this adventure by any means, which has all kinds of cool stuff in it. But the part where I get to they're going over the moat, and the moat is guarded by these things called fleshy archer contraptions. And they're, if I recall, Stevie, you keep me honest, but if I recall, they're just like things that stand there and fire arrows, but they can't move, and somehow they're just animated. And I sort of put myself in like, what if you sort of had a dim spark of life and you were actually like, had this sort of awareness that you're just rooted in place in the wind and rain, waiting for people to come twice a year to shoot arrows at them while you slowly disintegrate. And it was pretty awful. Even that's just the most minor, that's not a giant boss monster, but anyway, horrible just moment in vision for me, as I looked at that. So well done, Stephen.
And that's actually a great example of what we were talking about with tone, right? In a normal DCC adventure, they'd have some sort of weird kind of arcane name, but since it's a horror adventure, it just starts with fleshy and goes downhill from there, right?
Fleshy archer contraption. Yeah, exactly. Well, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, Alana, for your patience. We started late. We ran a little over too. So, Twitch Mistress, thank you for your patience and your kindness. I'm going to
interject real quick.
Yeah.
Can I interject? I wanted to, because you in the show notes you did want to put like a favorite adventure, and I did prep something. So real quick.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Gong Farmer's Almanac. Daniel J. Bishop has something in here called Brides of Blood. I don't ever hear people talk about it, but it's an awesome little funnel. It's got a vampire in there. It's really cool and horrific. But I wanted to get that in there before we signed off.
Okay.
He knows what he's doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that Bishop guy, he actually knows what he's doing and then some. So yes, thank you for the call out. I'll try to do you know which one that is?
2017 Gong Farmer.
Okay, excellent. I'll try to dig that up and link it. So thank you very much. With that, thank you, Wolf Manzella. Thank you very much. Thank you, Judge Stephen, for being an excellent guest host. Thank you, Judge Bob Jen, for being a gracious host. And thank you, Judge Bob, for all your help behind the scenes in Spellburn. You've done some editing and some extracting and splicing for us, and I really appreciate your help.
Sure.
So. An unsung hero of Spellburn, thankless and moneyless, and well, we're all moneyless, but anyway, we appreciate you. Thank you, Judge Thorin, our earlier guest. No thanks to the email crypt. May you rot in your crypt for all time. And thanks as always to Glitter Wizard, Loot the Body, St. Karloff. And don't forget, we have a working email again, spellburnband@gmail.com. Drop us some emails, and we have a special new judge announcement in our next episode. So join us the last Monday of November, and we'll talk then. Game on.